for joining us this year for the second annual Discover Beauty Symposium 2021, hosted by the Japan Expo and the Short Shorts Film Festival and Asia. 2021 is the 23rd edition of the Short Shorts Film Festival and Asia, which is one of the largest international film festivals in Asia. It is officially recognized by the Academy of Motion Pictures and Arts and Sciences. The winners of the 4 competitive sections are eligible to be considered for the Academy Awards. We're truly honored to be working with Japan Expo for the second year, following 2020, on this Discover Beauty Symposium. Our objective is to bring attention to the culture of filmmaking in Japan and also focus on aspects of Japanese beauty and aesthetics, especially for our foreign audiences. This year, we have gathered amazing women involved with the film industries in both the U.S. and Japan. Please welcome our distinguished panelists. First, we have Chikako Suzuki, who is an art director working in Hollywood that was awarded an Emmy. Welcome, Chikako-san.
Thank you for having me.
For our second panelist, we have Emma Yamazaki, a distinguished documentary director who has been honored in international film festivals for her amazing work. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
And last but not least, by any means, we have LiLiCo, who is a well-known personality in Japan, a film commentator on the Japanese media, and an amazing film actor. Thank you, LiLiCo, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Today's panel discussion will feature 2 parts. The first half will focus on the topic of women in filmmaking. Diversity in the film industry has gotten a lot of international attention and quite a lot less in Japan. We will be exploring the cases of Hollywood and Japan specifically today. The second part will be about the impact of women on Japanese art and aesthetics. In an area dominated by men, women have been largely ignored despite their very important contribution to the history and development of art in Japan. Okay, we're going to move on to the Women in Filmmaking section. Let me just introduce it by saying that women have been involved in filmmaking, of course, in many roles, as film directors, actors, of course, cinematographers, writers, even producers. But it's also true that they've been extremely underrepresented in the industry. This is not a problem just for the United States, but it's common all around the world, and it's especially acute and not addressed in Japan. So we're going to be covering both aspects. In Hollywood, we have an annual report that is published. It's called the Celluloid Ceiling Report, and it's been going on since around 1993. This year's report tells us that of all the films, the top grossing 100 films in Hollywood, 21% have been represented by women as directors, executive producers, writers, cinematographers, and editors. In the specific categories, only 18% of all directors are women, only 17% of all writers are women, 30% of producers, however, are women. It's a high mark for that category. Only 22% of the editors are women, and even worse, only 6% of the cinematographers are represented by women. So I want to begin this section by asking Chikako, who has a lot of experience making films in the United States, especially in Hollywood, to talk to us a little bit about her experience, and juxtaposed with her experience, how does she feel about hearing these numbers that were measured just this year?
Right. I was born and raised in Japan. However, I've never worked for Japanese productions, so I can only speak from my experience in Hollywood. So I've been working for Hollywood for more than 15 years, and definitely I can see that things have been changing, especially after the Me Too movement. So when I started out, of course, there were women at the job, but like in office and things, but I didn't see many women on the set. But that's been changing for sure. And I see more women on the set lately, and especially like the normally male-dominant department such as lighting and grips department. Even in those departments, I start to see women, and I think it's a great thing for Hollywood and for filmmaking, for the anything women can bring to a set.
Right. What, in your experience, do you think changes when a woman is in an important leadership role in filmmaking?
Well, I don't think women are working thinking like they are women, but definitely they can bring in different elements to the set, and I kind of feel like actresses, female actors, performers, I think they feel a little more comfortable if more women are around at the set.
LiLiCo-san, hearing this about the United States, I mean, you comment about American films all the time.
That you said that you see women on the set after the Me Too.
Yeah.
But that's like 3-4 years ago, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I see more and more after
More
the
and
Me Too
more.
movement. Yeah.
I think that's around the time when the industry started to say we need to consciously increase the role of women. Emma, you've kind of worked in both U.S. and Japan film industries. What are your thoughts hearing these numbers about Hollywood?
Yeah, my experience is mostly in the New York independent documentary scene, also like documentary in TV. I will never forget my first job. I had a female boss, and she was back at work 6 weeks after having twins with her twins. So she would be breastfeeding behind me as I edited for her. And I feel like that kind of thing is quite more common in the US than definitely in Japan. And I think, but I also realized that the successful women in the field didn't have kids until, even my boss kind of had these twins in her early 40s, I think, because she really wanted children, but she, I think, had to kind of figure out how to balance that with her career, or it wasn't even possible. I don't have kids, but as I think about that in the near future, that's something I also think, especially in Japan, there's not really a nice system in place to kind of, consider what to do when you want to start a family, and I'm very concerned about being forgotten in a way if I don't work for a few years or something like that. I think it's kind of an unforgiving industry, both in the U.S. and Japan. But I think in Japan especially, there's issues still around working with young kids that I foresee in my near future.
I see. So
I think there's a support system in Hollywood for working women. Like a big studios, there's like daycare system.
Within the studio?
Yeah, in the studio.
Nice.
I think, Japan can, destroy a person's life, I think. Yeah, because I wanted children too, but I was so afraid. Maybe I disappear. Well, I didn't have a boyfriend at that time. That's what you want to say, right? But, even I heard, I've never been working in a Japanese office, but when you want a job, they say your boss, your male boss says like, maybe one day you're gonna have children and then you're gonna quit this office, right? That's the first thing they say.
Yes.
And I'm born and raised in Sweden, so I haven't really felt the same thing. But when I came to Japan, I felt that this is really weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that systematically Japan has to really consider and address.
They really have to change faster. They're always so slow.
Yes. There is an agency in the United Nations called UN Women. And one of the pillars of their policy is one that's called he for she. It's a recognition that men in important leadership roles need to proactively empower women. So if there is an opportunity for a position or a role, that he should consider thinking about placing a capable, able woman in that role. You were telling me a little bit that when you were trying to break into the Hollywood film industry, you tried all sorts of things, but there was somebody who kind of very early on recognized you and said, sure, come on in. Was it a man?
That was a man.
Yeah. How did you feel about the way in which he brought you into the industry?
Well, I've never thought about, I think I'm lucky in a way, because I feel like our department is the most diverse department in Hollywood.
The art direction.
Yeah, art direction, yeah. Right. Art department. There are lots of female production designers, art directors, and even nationality too. We are pretty a diverse department.
People. No, that's interesting. Another thing that UN Women mention is the importance of now women like yourselves in position of influence in your industry to support women to follow you, to bring them up whenever there is an opportunity. Do you guys ever consciously in your work do that kind of thing?
I don't know. Women look at me and says that just by watching me, they get stronger and they get the courage to say what they think. You were not allowed to say what you really wanted to say here in Japan.
Which you're famously known for. You say exactly what you think.
Yes. I have to. I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie. But, I think that talk about women, it depends on what kind of personality you have. If you're shy and your voice is really, really not loud at all, then maybe people say things to you. But if you're like me, if someone says something to me, I'm gonna, say 100 things, even more stronger back. So you have to be strong. I was not like this when I lived in Sweden. I was really quiet. I was the most quiet person in my family. I have to change something in this country. My mom is Japanese, so I wanted to try. I wanted to try what I could do here. I wanted to be a singer here in Japan. But what I heard from my mom was really the old-fashioned Japanese. She's a mechanical designer, and she was the only female in her office in Sweden. Even in Sweden, it was only male, only one female, but she was really fast, so no one could really complain and say rude things to her. But her salary was half because she was Japanese. She was always complaining about that, and I said that you can go back to Japan. But she was like, no, there's no job for a woman in 40s, 50s, 60s. But I said, no, Japan changed, but she didn't want to. And then she passed away at 69. Yeah.
It's a good point that just your presence and your insistence to be heard positively affects and impacts women to follow those footsteps. That's
but it's very scary.
I'm sure.
Yeah, very scary. But I don't look at the social media and things like that because this is me. So, and the people who write bad things about me, they don't give me any job and they don't give me any money. So I don't need to be nice to them. Right.
Good point.
Yeah, you don't want to work for those kind of people anyways, right?
Right. They just have time and they want to say, I think point your anger at yourself.
Sure.
Not at people.
Yeah. Emma-san, so as a documentary film director, I think you have a lot more freedom to choose your crew, arrange for who does what. Are you consciously trying to place women in roles in your production?
Yeah, first, I feel like I very much relate to some things Chikako-san was saying about, upon even preparing for this panel, I maybe for the first time had to consider, what things I have accomplished because I'm a woman and what jobs I've gotten or not gotten because of my gender. I feel like I've realized that throughout my 20s, I never wanted to blame my gender for something when something didn't work out, and when something did, I didn't necessarily attribute it to my gender. If someone offered me a job, I hope it was for my talents and not because I'm a female. Although in my 20s, I found it quite difficult to navigate at times when someone was offering me something because I was also a woman and whatever that added to that man. I think the issues that rose because of Me Too, not necessarily, sexual assaults, but kind of the power plays that go between powerful men and younger women. I definitely had to navigate through that, and because I did, I think to one of your questions about what I'm doing for the next generation of people that are coming under, it's crazy to think I'm at an age now where I should be thinking about that, but I think I do look out for younger women because if I knew what I know now when I was 10 years younger, I think I wouldn't have had to be as afraid sometimes. But I also think that there's some, it does depend on the woman, because first, when I'm assembling a crew, I just want to think of the best person for the job. And because I am a female and I'm the director, I actually like to balance out the team. So often I work with male directors because, depending on the subjects, different people might be drawn to different personalities, different genders. I work with a lot of younger kids, and sometimes, being a male or female kind of, naturally, gives the kids options to kind of lean towards one person or the other. But when I do have an option between a man and a woman, I am conscious of who I choose, because I do think that it's important, and I kind of always wish that someone had kind of, not necessarily a woman hired me, but like given me advice in the way that I feel like I'm ready to give now to the people younger than me.
That's great. That's really important. Any of you have any more experiences that's related to filmmaking in Hollywood, or have you ever auditioned for something in Hollywood, or have you ever?
Yeah.
Yeah? What was that like?
Yeah, I've been auditioning for things here in Japan too, but when a producer came from Hollywood, they called me and said that you have to come here, and that was a hotel room. Oh.
Were you concerned?
Well, I thought that it was okay. I mean, okay, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I went like, like this, But, it was only reading.
I see.
Yeah.
Right.
And things like that. But I was really young at that time, so I think I was so afraid, so I started crying maybe.
No.
I think I remember that. But maybe that was because he couldn't do anything. Because I started to cry. Maybe if I was like, okay, what do you want me to do?
You were one-on-one?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's probably not appropriate.
No.
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 Yeah.
But that happens here in Japan too.
Yeah.
I will not say right now, but maybe for like 30 years ago, maybe that was not normal, but that could happen.
Yeah, because that happened a lot in Hollywood many years ago. So,
Yeah, that's the Me Too
right,
thing.
before Me Too, yeah.
Maybe that's a good segue into speaking a little bit about the Japanese film industry. Unlike the cellular ceiling report, which is, it's a play on words on the glass ceiling idea. But in Japan, there was a report that came out in, 2018. It was published by the Cine Mandrake Publishing Company. And it did a survey on 111 films, Japanese films made and released in Japan from making companies like Toho, Shochiku, Toei, Nikkatsu, Warner Brothers, Sony Picture Entertainment, etc. And what they did find was that the issue, as we just heard the numbers in Hollywood, is much more stark in Japan. Of all the film directors in Japan, only 6% are represented by women. And of all the writers in Japan, only 27% are represented by women. So the number is quite low compared to the US, and also the reporting is not regular, which probably also suggests that there isn't a concerted effort to address the issue and do something about it. If you're reporting about it every year, somebody's watching the progress. It's not happening here. I mean, what do you think should be done, can be done? Any thoughts?
I think there must be like a chicken and egg effect, when you never see the female directors growing up or around you, you don't associate yourself with having one day wanting to be one, I think, and I think that's, definitely, I think if women were exposed to especially at a younger age when, you're a kid and you're thinking about what you want to do when you grow up, I think girls these days, very few girls are dreaming of becoming film directors because there are very few role models.
Right.
I think there's I can't really imagine that they wouldn't be interested if that opportunity was more normal. And I think Japan is quite behind in that way. And I think, for me, I'm not a a major studio director. I'm a documentary director, but in my most recent project, it was all over the poster. It's like, female director, 女性監督, and that was a selling point, I think, because it was more special. And it was a film about high school baseball, a very male world, so maybe that was
Great
why
film.
as well. Thank you. But I think whatever that means, and I got so many comments about it was 女性ならではの like movie, and whatever that means, that's really hard for me to comment on. I don't know how I would have made the film differently if I was a man, but I used everything I have, including the fact that I'm a woman, especially in that man's world, to make it.
Right.
But that just shows you like it's still very rare, and I think in a way once you're in the industry that also sometimes gives you a leg up, it's a female director's film these days, but I think that also leads to not as much of a support system in Japan. In New York there were so many kind of initiatives even for groups grants and different ways that women could advance, and I think there's very little of that here still. And I do notice, especially I also work with TV broadcasters, and up to a certain level there's a lot of women like directors, like you said, maybe, and then you get to like the executives of a broadcaster, and I think you'll quickly see just like the celluloid ceiling, like the most important 20 people in a major media company, I bet you there's very few women, and I think that's where decisions get made, and the perspective of the woman's side is often not considered, and so that trickles down. So even when I know many people that are kind of more in the system than me that have to fight this like unseen power from above, and I think it does have to do with women are so looked down upon. I mean, my biggest shock, I started coming back to Japan about 3 years ago, having spent almost 10 years in New York, and I was had made a few films. I was still young, but I had done a few things. But I think just my age also is a big deal in Japan. But I was just assumed that I would be always the one pouring a drink for all the people at the table, or everybody kept calling me, Emma, you're so otokomae. And inherently that word is so interesting because it means you're handsome like a man, right? Like it uses the word man, and I know what they meant was I was outspoken. Probably maybe you get that too,
yes.
Like you're otokomae, and like
otokomae,
why does like speaking out or being a strong person is associated with not being a woman in the language, right? So that I just thought that was funny, and just like little things I had to adjust.
About the importance of having role models is not just for women, because then they can envision, if I see a film director, a female film director, and see how she works, what her job is like, maybe I want to aspire to be that. But also, it probably continues to feed the preconceptions that men have about what women should or should not be doing. And it's probably reflected into the language which you pointed out, like, what did you say? Otokomae. There's also Mori-san used, Mori-san's assistant or another member of the cabinet said, Minister Hashimoto was otokomasari, which is another way of saying you're kind of oppressive to men. You win over men, and that's kind of like potentially problematic, but isn't it funny? So there is this kind of preconception that's even part of the language oftentimes about roles in vocations like this. Do you guys, Chikako-san, you don't have any experience making film in Japan or being involved in a project in Japan?
No.
No. Soka.
Were you not interested, or what happened?
Well, I'm interested in a way, but I do feel like I can't do the job I do over there, in Hollywood.
Right.
If I do the same thing, same way in Japan.
Why?
I don't know. It's just obviously I haven't met many Japanese filmmakers, so I can't really say. However, I didn't meet this person. I went for interview just because the EP of the project knows me, and he asked me to help this person, right? So I went to meet this person, but he was like this typical Japanese man who has a strong idea of what he should be doing or what other people should be doing. So he was kind of like, I don't need a help from Hollywood. So I didn't get the good experience from meeting this person, and I shouldn't say everyone's like him. I'm sure there are good people out there, but I do feel like maybe Japanese industry has this old way of doing things, and they don't really wanna bring in new way from Hollywood or anything like that. So it's just a little less convenient for me.
Is he famous?
I don't think so.
I don't.
Maybe.
There you go.
Okay, so we're moving to part 2 of today's panel discussion. And this section is about women that impacted Japan's sense of beauty. Let me start by introducing Empress Suiko. Empress Suiko's reign from 593 AD to 628 AD was revolutionary in her commitment to attain a nation of peace. She embraced the teaching of Buddhism, then a new religion that was introduced to Japan from the Korean peninsula. She was also the first ever empress to rule any land in East Asia. She recognized that the beauty of Buddhist art had an important role to play in spreading this teaching of peace, and thus she became an active matron of the arts by promoting architecture and artwork that today is recognized as a World Heritage by UNESCO. The period of her rule is known as the Asuka period, the only age that is identified with its architecture and art. Here you see Hoduji Temple. It is the oldest wooden structure surviving in the world today. Its pillars utilize the essence of Greek architecture that traveled the Silk Road to Japan. The structure incorporated entasis for the pillars, a copy of classical columns from ancient Greece that created the image of straightness as you looked up from the bottom to the ceiling. The statue of Buddha Maitreya Bodhisattva sitting in complete enlightenment, contemplating in half lotus position at Hoduji Temple is the one you see next to it. The next person is the artist Murasaki Shikibu. By the Heian period in early 11th century, when Murasaki Shikibu was creating what is called the first novel in the history of the world, The Tale of Genji, the position of women in Japanese society had declined. To achieve status, the only path open to women were those of refining their beauty and the art of poetry and storytelling. Such women were allowed into the center of political power. Her work inspired countless paintings by many artists throughout the ages and became a role model for women artists around the globe. She wrote about love and intrigue in universal themes that transcended the ages, and her stories are read by people all over the world. The next slide you see is about the work that was recreated by artists based on her storytelling in an era without printing, with illustrations that further depicted her stories. The next artist is Katsushika Owie. Active in the mid-18th century Edo period, Owie was the daughter of the famous Hokusai. She was a great artist that learned the art from her father. Art historians claim that she actually worked on most of the famous Hokusai's masterpieces as well, and some of her pieces hang in museums by his name. She was first discovered internationally by British nobility, Duke of Knott, who was traveling in Japan in 1890, and his purchase of her work gained her celebrity status at the age of 15. Her works show mastery of perspective and light and darkness. Her paintings and prints hang in great museums around the world. Here you can see one of her masterpieces that illustrates the Yoshiwara red light district of Tokyo. The next artist we feature is Uemura Shoen. She is most well known for her bijinga, or drawings of beautiful Japanese women. Shoen was extremely popular, but also shunned by her male seniors and colleagues. She fought intense discrimination, but never gave up. She won a government prize, and her work was purchased for the government archives. She left a quote about her experience creating this work. "I wanted to depict the unyielding female spirit that cannot be denied or harmed by anyone. My earnest desire is to create works of women like a fragrant gem, never vulgar, always pure. She eventually received a preeminent cultural medal from the Emperor of Japan. The next artist is Kusama Yayoi. Kusama is the dominant force of contemporary art, not just in Japan, but globally. Known around the world for her signature polka dots, she was ignored in Japan until she began to gain international recognition. She has revealed that the polka dots were inspired by her own visions related to a nervous disorder. She claims to have learned to control it through art. She has also learned to inspire young female artists and art lovers around the world. These two works depicted here are representative works of hers. One of it is a phallus symbol from 1965. The other for her application of her polka dots to her pumpkin series that is recognized as one of her masterpieces created in the 1990s. The last artist we are featuring is Marie Kondo. Thanks to streaming and social media, she is known as KonMari, and she may be the most watched Japanese artist and expert consultant on the art of decluttering. Netflix's Tidying Up with Marie Kondo is a social phenomenon and a global hit. She does not suggest merely to discard things to bring beauty back to your living quarters, but she asks the viewer, do you feel a special tingle in your heart for this object? If not, let's get rid of it. Some have also suggested that the world she creates is connected to Zen artistry. She helps bring calm and meditation to your space. Tidying up is now the representative art form of Japan. KonMari shown here in one of her perfect minimalist decluttered spaces that she shows everyone how to recreate. Okay, so this is part 2 about the impact of women on Japanese beauty and aesthetics. Speaking of underrepresented women in Japanese art more broadly, what do you think about the focus of part 2? And were there any artists or people depicted in the previous section that you felt most sort of akin to or impressed by or interested in?
I mean, I'm not Japanese, but do you all know everyone? Does Japanese people know about
I know
these?
some of them, but no.
Not all.
Not all.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Or like I've seen like some of the paintings, but I didn't know it was done by women. I mean, I should know. I'm an art director, so I should know everything about art, but I don't.
So this is not something that you study in school?
Not in Japanese
Not in
schools.
Japanese schools.
But if you go to any kind of United States art school or art history or basic understanding about global art, it is introduced. So there is this gap between it being these people being known overseas and not known in Japan.
Really happy to hear that there were strong women several hundred years ago too. That's good to hear. But if you don't know about them, that's
right.
No, that's
So maybe
tricky.
there is a way to address this by realizing that it's important to recognize great works in Japanese art, even by gender, and maybe even to focus on it so that the next generation of artists may be inspired by this and realize that they too, as women, for example, aspire to some greatness in art in Japan. You know, filmmakers benefit by being inspired from art in general.
I think so, yes. First, I didn't know about Hokusai's daughter. She's a wonderful artist, and her father's name is on some of her work. That's something that I think, whether it took a couple of hundred years, it's great that it's out there now. And sometimes it happens that way. I think it's very common, even to recent times, that women's work is kind of claimed by someone else. I also think that women's work sometimes isn't as well known is not as credited, even if it's important work. I think when I made this film about high school baseball, there was a lot of comments from in Japan and in the U.S. about the the roles of women in my film. In the U.S., there was a lot of comments about how the women that supported the high school baseball coach, or various supporting roles, how their stories kind of were as important as the men's. Like, there was an interesting conversation about the women I included in the film, but I think in Japan there was almost no mention of the women that I included in the film. I feel like they weren't even seen because they weren't the kantoku, or they weren't the players. And I think just like, you wonder about how different kind of roles are credited, and how they're seen. And so I think often women's roles have not been as forefront as men, and I think that's also has changed in recent years, and I hope someone like Hokusai's daughter will one day be known as well as her dad, but I think like the fact that I didn't know her yet, we're not there yet, but I think like sometimes it takes time, but I think these stories should be told, and that's where hopefully someone like me or the storytellers can, there's and I think now the stories that we choose to tell are really important. I mean, you put together these 6 women that we learned some things about today, and I think now it's up to this generation of filmmakers to uncover stories about the past, to not only find stories that are happening in real time.
Can you do something about this? Wonderful. Yeah, I started to get angry, I feel, because yes, beautiful, strong women, and nobody knows about it.
Yeah, I think like filmmakers can help, introduce that type of women to the world. Like Hokusai's daughter, I didn't know about her till I saw this drama by NHK. Mm-hmm. That's one example.
So there it is, right? So there was even in Japan an effort to re-recognize her greatness. That was good. Yeah.
But maybe a rap artist can do a song about, so younger people wants to listen, you can do documentaries or movies or a song or something like that. Konmari?
Yeah.
I didn't know that she was so huge, around the world. So when I went back home to Sweden, my friend asked, do you know Konmari? Why do you know Konmari? Because no Japanese people are famous in Sweden because it's so far away. So why do you know Konmari? Well, it's Netflix.
Yeah.
I was okay, we know her, but I didn't know that you all know her too. I mean,
that she was that big even.
Yeah.
Right. Have you seen her films?
Netflix took a big part of it.
I never seen her Netflix TV series, but YouTube I've been watching, and I understand, the feeling, about, I've been doing that since like 40 years ago. So
yeah, you're a natural.
Yes, but I think that is very Japanese, to feel. When something bad happens, we all, like, even if maybe you don't believe in God, you do like this, oh, help. When we have an earthquake and things like that, my grandmother always said, Oji-chan, Oji-chan tasukete, help. It was always like that. So I think Japanese people do this very often.
Yeah.
And I also do it now, not when I lived in Sweden, but now I do it. So that's very Japanese and very beautiful, I think.
Yeah, and she's referring to the fact that in everything there is a spirit, and it must attract. If it attracts you, then keep it. Otherwise, let it go. Chikako, in your filmmaking in Hollywood, have you ever tried this kind of Japanese, sensibility of minimalism or decluttering?
Yeah, I always think less is more, but it's just like my motto, And I think that comes from me growing up in Japan, like a Japanese minimalism. It's within me. So it's just my, choice. But my design tend to be a little simpler. Or doesn't, try to take away the scene from, take away something from the scene. I try to support the scene, not like taking something away from the scene.
Yeah, echoing LiLiCo-san, I think Konmari in the U.S. at least,
she's huge.
Huge. I mean, I feel like, of course, Naomi Osaka comes to mind, other Japanese women that got really famous in recent years, but I think she's really up there. She was dominant in the American media, and all my friends, every single person I knew in New York was talking to me about her. I usually refer to Japanese things like sushi, ramen, like konmari became one of those words I refer to as
Sushi,
what
ramen,
Japan is
konmari.
known for. So she was huge, and again, I wonder, was part of her success, how much of that was to do with the fact that she's a woman. I don't know if a man doing the same thing, how that, or this a sensibility that comes, or a marketing strategy that came with the idea that, she's this woman that is doing this. I'm not sure about that, but I think she definitely she captures something that Japan was always known for, but now she's really emphasized this kind of minimalistic artistry. I feel like, in the way she captures something Japanese. I left Japan for almost 10 years, and then I finally saw beauty in things in Japan that I never saw growing up. Things as simple as trains coming on time as expected, or people kind of lining up on one side of the street, or escalators, kind of the beauty in society that works so well that I never noticed when I was growing up, because you take it for granted, and then you live in New York City and you realize you shouldn't take it for granted because it's not the same everywhere. And so for me, I've started to incorporate some of what I think is amazing about Japan into my films, whether it's like lines and, being like disciplined, this kind of thing. Of course, all of that is, I like to say, hyori ittai, the same side of the same one hand, in terms of what's good about society and what's bad, because I think that's why things are really uptight and a lot of people are unhappy in Japan as well. But I think it took me to step away from Japan to even see some of the beauty about Japan that is now part of what I do as a storyteller. And so I wonder if, I think, going back to how these people might be more famous outside of Japan than inside, I think, and all of us have in common here also this international perspective that I think is as valuable, or if not more, than also what our gender brings. I think what we create or what we think is beautiful is combined of various things, and I think kind of hearing about the story of these women, I'm more interested also about what other factors played into their life that's made them create their art, because for me, I always wonder how much of how I think is it my experience as a woman, is it because I'm half Japanese and not fully, and that has come with complexities, and also this experience of living abroad and having a new perspective. And I think artists and storytellers always have this hopefully we have many sides of ourselves that do what we do. But I learned a lot from these 6 women, actually, and I want to go research some more, because I think we should always learn from the people that came before us, and I'm sure there are many others. It's just too bad that some of them we'll never know about, because history wasn't written equally with gender.
It's his story, after all. LiLiCo-san, you kind of reminded me of Uemura Shoen, because she was in a society that was very oppressive to her, but her demeanor, the way that she approached it, I think she was very confident, resolute, and she didn't take no for an answer or a negative comment as the end. She persevered, and you were describing in the first part of today that you are who you are, and
I want
live with
an explanation. If someone says no, I want to know why.
Right.
Because Japanese people, they say no because it's a rule. And I don't think it's a rule. I want the explanation. Can you explain? No. Then
why not?
Why not? Bring me a person that can explain, That's important.
Yes.
Because it's okay, but I want to know why. Because then I can change and make it to a yes.
Yeah. Do you guys want to know why these women, despite their huge contributions to the sense of Japanese beauty and being recognized globally, that especially in Japan, gets to the point where either their names are taken off or...
Well, I can kind of guess why.
Well...
I think it's men's power, they wanted to oppress women. That's what I guess. Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently most of the denial happened, all through history, but very concentratedly after the Meiji Restoration, where it was really important to depict a Japanese family with a strong man where everybody just listens. Women have an extremely supportive role, is not involved with creativity or any kind of management. So in that sense, maybe it was an inconvenient truth.
I found that found out about 3 women in the U.S. Out of 6. So if I were just living in Japan for all the time, probably I didn't know about them. Maybe I don't know.
Even less
Yeah.
so, right.
Kusama, yeah, she's one of the female I found out in the U.S. I went to this small museum in Pittsburgh and saw this exhibit with polka dots, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? And I saw the name, and there was a Kusama, and oh my God, she's a Japanese lady. So there you go.
There you go. And LiLiCo, you had some thoughts about her polka dots and how it may be more an effect of her mother than anything else.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about other families. But I think she had maybe the parents, but she found a way to express herself, even if maybe it must have been so hard. But after all, she got so beautiful things she wrote. So yeah.
Yes. We haven't talked much about Murasaki Shikibu. She is the first novelist in world history.
That's
it's quite
huge.
Amazing. It's huge.
That's huge.
And of course, I learned about her in junior high or high school, I forgot. But, I did learn about her and the Tales of Genji. But I think at some universities in the U.S., they teach Tales of Genji and the Lady Murasaki, right?
Yes, for any kind of introduction to Japanese history, art, or culture, she's the thing to read. Just going back to KonMari for a second, it reminds me actually of, Emma, your documentary about the baseball players, Koshien. And you were telling me a little bit about how neat everything is, and in a sense, it made the baseball stadium look so beautiful, very different from other cultures, perhaps. Any comments about that?
Yeah, I think, high school baseball is a very extreme part of Japanese society, and within that, we tried to emphasize, the helmets being in a perfect line and the shoes being in a perfect line and the kids bowing in sync, and kind of this group mentality that comes out of being part of that world, which again is it's hyori ittai between it being too much and it being beautiful. But I think for an international audience, they just kind of saw, I'm trying to make films that kind of suggest to the world why Japan might be the way it is, where kind of a little bit of our history, not ancient, not old history like this, but more kind of in the past 100 years, and what's brought us to this moment, and therefore questioning where we might be headed. And I think, I was really into we brought in an international American crew, and for foreigners, a regular sight of Japanese shoes being in a perfect line, it's art, something that I would walk by, the camera person would be, couldn't stop talking about how beautiful these shoes were, and I think that really helped that we incorporated that into the film. In Japan, it's kind of normal, right, until someone tells you, oh no, that's actually beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some of that going on, and for me as someone who was lucky enough to live outside of Japan and just always have this kind of perspective about Japan from an insider as well as an outsider, that's something I'm also trying to just re-emphasizing. Hey, it's amazing that our trains run on time. There might be a consequence that might lead to why we're also uptight about other things. But if we make changes in society, like right now, I'm filming a documentary in a Japanese elementary school for 1 year. Because I really think a Japanese elementary school is where a lot of these values are, introduced. You clean your own classrooms, you serve your own lunches, you have to be on time. It's not like the world of high school baseball, but there's rules and there's restrictions, and people learn to live within that. And I think even that, it all connects to where we might be headed, and just kind of suggesting and so I'm running with the things that I've learned and trying to make it into art or films in my case.
The artworks that we were kind of introduced to today, some of them are more than 1,000 years old. And of course, beauty is forever, but to a certain extent, as long as it is material, it doesn't last unless we consciously conserve it. And there is quite an art in conserving artwork like this, and it's really evolved in places like Japan, and I think also in Europe. But I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce a film, Emma, that you created called Wheels of Fate, the story of Rickshaw Man. It's about Muhomatsu no Issho, the life of Muhomatsu, a certain character. And I brought this up because it's featured in this year's Short Shorts Film Festival. It will be shown from June 11th until the 21st, and it can be viewed online. So if any of you are watching this and it's still within that time frame, you can see the film online. Tell me a little bit about why you featured this story and focused on preserving film, which is also a form of art. And unless it is maintained, old films do get destroyed.
Right. And I didn't know much about film restoration until I married my husband, Eric Nyari, who between him and his father for many decades now have restored over 1,000 films around the world, Hollywood films, European films, and more recently Japanese films like Muhomatsu no Issho. The one that was restored last year was shot in 1943. It's one of the few wartime Japanese films that wasn't just a straight up war propaganda film. It was known to be one of the most human ningen-teki film of that time, and it was also censored twice, once by the Japanese government during the war because they found it inappropriate that a rickshaw man, such a low-level man, would fall in love with a widow of an army general, and that wasn't allowed to be shown during wartime. But then in the post-war, during the American occupation, the film was cut in other ways because they thought it was too militaristic in other ways. And so it had this very interesting history, and it was also finally greenlit to be restored during this COVID period, while a particular man, the longtime assistant of Kazuo Miyagawa, who shot this film, before COVID, he was always telling me, I want to restore this film before I die, if it's the last thing I do. And he went ahead and did it. He supervised the restoration, right in the year where the film was really in bad shape. Film deteriorates, especially when it's not preserved well. And so it was important to get it done also during the time when people who know what it should have looked like are still alive, which is right now, and not maybe in maybe another decade or so, but the people who worked with film are really getting old now, and there's a kind of a limited window where restorations can be done correctly. And so kind of learning about the work that my husband has been doing and kind of falling in love with, his name is Miyajima-san, the main character of the documentary and the guy who supervises the restoration. It just seemed like something I had to do, especially in a time where this was last year when everything was uncertain. I wouldn't say I can't imagine it was like wartime, but for someone who was born in the Heisei period, like it was very little freedom and just, staying at home, it made you wonder, and being told, art was maybe not huyo fukyu, this idea that we don't have to do things that aren't necessary, and being told to stay at home, it really made me think about all these things, and ultimately decided that with the restoration of the film, it was important to include a documentary that included the history of the film, the people who made it, kind of risking their lives to make this film during wartime, and then the guy who was kind of risking his life to restore it during the COVID period. And so I think I found it really important to do because also as a storyteller, also as someone who's trying to do some important things while also questioning sometimes, it's not directly saving the world, right? Like filmmaking is not like, I don't know how it contributes to world peace or these things that I hope for, but I'm always believing that there's meaning to it now, and hopefully it'll outlast me. I hope films I make are important enough that they're around once I die and beyond. And so I think in that case, I realized that the people who are no longer with us and made these films, the least we can do is preserve the films that exist so that, future generations can watch. And so that's not what I do directly, but I was involved with this documentary in that way.
Oh, that's great. Well, we're coming down to some last minute stuff, but Chikako-san, you studied theater and art in the United States. Do you remember if there were any examples of female trailblazers that were focused in your education?
I can't recall.
Emma-san, how about you? You went to NYU?
Yeah. I more than kind of what I studied in the classroom, I feel like one thing we haven't discussed yet that I feel strongly is, earlier we spoke about how kind of the he for she idea that the men kind of, perhaps more in the U.S. than Japan are kind of making way for women. I think the U.S. Japan is behind in that way, but I also think that fellow women in Japan, and maybe that's a generational thing. I think whether it's because, like you referred to, from the Meiji era, there was certain roles that women were given, and it became the standard of how women should be, and that's why strong women like you, are like seen as the outcast in a way. They're not like, we were talking earlier about how we're like not the typical Japanese women, because there's a vision of a typical Japanese woman, and what I've been shocked about, in recent years, even with the Me Too movement, and in Japan, like the women that spoke up, didn't get support in the way from other women in Japan as people were getting in other countries. And I think there's not just with kind of respect and talking about different figures around role models, lack of role models. I do also think that there's a missing piece here that we haven't talked about, which is kind of how women view what women should be. And I think a lot of Japanese women think like it's fine the way it is. They're happy being kind of in more support roles, or they don't necessarily feel like, and they kind of feel a bit strange about women that speak out, or otokomae, this idea. And I think there's work to be done there too. I don't have the answer, and I understand like that women that have come before me have also gone through certain things that maybe have led to kind of behave like their perspective on things. But I think this next generation, kind of the kids that are coming up now, at least in the U.S., have a totally different radical idea where it's so normal that, of course, men and women are respected equally. These ideas are getting ancient. They're so normal. But I think in Japan, we can say it on paper, but it's actually not in the minds of a lot of people, both male and female. So hopefully, whether that's through the education system or more representation in the media, like if women like LiLiCo-san started to be portrayed as a regular Japanese woman, I think we'll make progress, but I don't think that's happening like anytime soon. It'll take some time, because I think it takes time for ideas to sink in and evolve.
But I'm not that strong. That's my image as LiLiCo.
Right.
That's my image. But everybody says, you're the woman among the women. You are so Japanese, they say. So I don't understand I'm not a housewife, but as a shifu, I do everything perfect. I wait for my husband. I don't go to bed earlier than him. He goes to the bath first. He takes the bath first and everything. But nobody understands that, because I'm so strong outside when I work. But I think that is what is necessary here in Japan. Housewives, many housewives here in Japan, right? In Sweden, there's no housewives. Did your mom work? Yes. Yes, she did.
Right.
So I think you can create your image, I think. And that is, you need that to work, to get a good work and to earn money, so you can live in an apartment that you want to live in.
Right. Well, that's a good segue into the last thing that I wanted to touch upon. The dream, the aspiration, what's next. You talked about sort of nurturing the next generation. I mean, some people might say, God, it's so bad, women are so unrepresented. We're so far away from being at the right place, or that, it's kind of hopeless if women continue to not insist or be weak or be afraid. But the flip side of that maybe is that things are changing and it can only get better. And I think that the idea that it can only get better is a very hopeful one for filmmaking and for artistry and for creating beauty. How do you guys feel about that? You're hopeful about the future of art and
I think it's going to move faster from now, because it's you have everything now. You had nothing first, but so maybe, and then it's the courage, I think, if they have the courage to say what they think, because I think the heart of the Japanese people is the most beautiful thing, but they don't have the courage to to speak for themselves.
Well, then it's up to the three of you.
Yeah, don't be shy. That's my only advice I have. Yeah.
Chikako-san, how do you feel about the future of filmmaking?
I think future of filmmaking is getting better, or like it's going to be better. Of course, there are more focus on female now, and that helps for female filmmakers like Emma-san. And however, I feel like we still need more support from society and the government in a way. So that's what I hope for. A little more support.
Well, I'm very hopeful because of the existence of women like you, creative and powerful. I think that inspires the next generation, and it also makes the things that have been difficult possible and real.
But so, I think we're maybe too strong, these three women here today.
大丈夫. So we're running out of time today. So I just wanted to thank you for this incredible panel discussion. The three of you guys are quite amazing. I think the viewers of this panel discussion are going to be certainly inspired. And I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us and your time. And I hope you keep doing what you do. ありがとうございます。ありがとうございました。So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I hope you join us again next year. We're going to keep this up. Thank you very much. ありがとうございました。